As I said, Anaki is I've known Anaki for many years. I won't say how many years, but he is a researcher who is known for his work on flowering and genetics of avocado and other subtropical fruit crops. And he and his lab have done quite a bit of work on flower quality. Anaki.
Thank you, Marilu, and good morning to everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. And yes, I'm going to talk about flowering, and I'm going to focus in two main topics. One is the flower quality, and the other one is going to be pollen load on avocado fruit set. Okay, so when we see an avocado tree like this one, you can have thousands, if not millions, of flowers, and then after that, we have the inflorescence with the flowers, but at the end we only have a few fruits in the inflorescence. So in my group, we've been working for a long time now, seeing what happens here. Why only a few flowers produce fruits, and why the rest of the flowers do not develop into fruits. And that's something that happens everywhere in the world. So avocado is characterized by a very low fruit set compared to the initial number of flowers. So of course, there is a massive drop of flowers and also of small developing fruitlets. And the thing is that average natural pollination is about 0.15%. So that means that for every 1,000 of flowers in avocado, only between 1 and 2 will produce fruits. And that's the average, more or less, worldwide. The thing is that when you hand pollinate avocados, so when you take the pollen from a male flower into the stigma of a female flower, you can increase fruit set, even in this case, in this example here in this graph, up to 2.8%. This was using pollen from Fuerte until has a female avocado flower. So you can increase from 0.15% to 2.8%, even higher with other cultivars after hand pollination. But still, even doing hand pollination, most of the flowers will not produce fruits. So here we have like two different factors. One is that there's a lack of pollination because you can increase a fruit set when you pollinate by hand, but even if you pollinate by hand, still most of the fruits will drop. So there's something intrinsic to the tree that makes that the flowers will drop. Mailu went through this. This is an image of a female avocado flower. Here we see the white stigma, receptive, ready to receive the pollen from a male avocado flower. The flower will close overnight, and it will open the following day as a male flower. The anthers are open, the pollen will be released, and the stigmas, in this case, are brownish. So they are no longer receptive for the pollen grains. The pollen grains can arrive to the stigma, they can even germinate a little bit, but usually, at least under the conditions in southern Spain, we get no fertilization when the flowers are pollinated on the male stage. And then we can have some overlap between opening male flowers and closing female flowers in the same inflorescence or in the same tree. Okay. Marilu went through these different kinds of varieties depending on the behavior or type A and type B varieties. So there are, I think, four main factors that could explain this massive drop of flowers and fruits in avocado. The first one is environmental factors, and Marilu went through most of them in her talk. The second one is flower quality. The third one will be the need of pollinator varieties to provide pollen for the female flowers. And the last one will be the presence of pollinators and the efficiency of these pollinators. And I'm mainly going to talk about number 2, flower quality, and also about number 4, pollinators and the amount of pollen that arrives onto the stigmas. So just for the first one, just in environmental factors, one thing which we are seeing, at least in Spain, is that due to climate change, avocado flowering is every year is earlier. So this is an example of Hass avocado, and we've seen in the last 20 years, how has avocado blooming period is earlier and earlier every year. So 20 years ago, has avocado was flowering in Spain in between April and May, and in the last few years is mainly established in March and the half of April. And the main problem with this is that this is due mainly because our winters are increasingly warmer. The thing is that often in this time of the year, in late March, early April, temperatures are still too low for good pollen germination and good fertilization. So we have earlier avocado flowering with cool temperatures, and then that is resulting in lower yields. And this is an image. Here we have on the top a female avocado flower, and this is a male avocado flower, and this is how the pollen grains and pollen tubes look under the microscope. So this is an image of the stigma of the female avocado flower, this one here, after we pollinate with pollen. So these are pollen grains, and these are the pollen tubes that grow through the style towards the ovary. In the female stage, the stigmas are receptive to the pollen grains, so the pollen grains germinate and they grow the pollen tubes towards the ovary. However, during the male phase, some pollen grains can germinate, but if you see, the pollen tubes don't grow very deep into the style. So usually when you pollinate, or when you get pollination during the male stage, there is no fertilization, embryo development, and fruit set, because the pollen grains don't germinate properly, or they don't grow, the pollen tubes don't grow well in the style. And this is what we see under the microscope in the embryo. So in the female flowers, you get embryo fertilization and embryo development. In the male flowers, when they are pollinated in the male stage, you don't get fertilization, you don't get embryo development, and those flowers are going to drop. Okay, so just summarizing our results about temperature and humidity during flowering, we've seen in Spain that temperatures above 25 degrees and below 15 degrees inhibit pollen germination and fertilization. Humidity is important because the higher humidity can extend the period of stigmatic receptivity, and usually humidities below 75% reduce stigmatic receptivity. There are differences among varieties in pollen germination at different temperatures. There are some varieties which pollen is better at low temperatures than others. And we haven't seen any fertilization events when the pollen arrives at the stigma during the male flowering phase. Okay, and then the second topic is flower quality. And when we look at the avocado flowers in the inflorescence, apparently they are all the same. They are very similar. And we don't see any differences among flowers in the inflorescence. However, when we look inside the flower, there are differences among the flowers. And this is an image at the microscope with a specific stain for starch. Starch is a carbohydrate that the plants use as to store energy. And here on the left, we see the ovary of an avocado flower with very few starch grains. And on the right, we see an ovary of an avocado flower with a high number of starch grains. So if we represent in a graph the number of flowers in an inflorescence or in an avocado tree and the amount of starch, we see that there are a few flowers with a very high starch content in the ovaries, most of the flowers with average starch content, and a few flowers with a very low amount of starch in the ovary. So our hypothesis was that what if only the flowers with high starch content, so that means flowers with high flower quality, are the ones that produce fruits, and these ones here with low starch content, even if they are pollinated, they're going to drop because they are not ready to nourish the embryo. The thing is that to study this is a destructive method. We have to collect the flowers from the trees and fix them and look under the microscope. So we don't know what happened with those flowers if we had left them on the tree. So we developed a system to study this. And what we did was to hand pollinate a female avocado flower, which is here, with a male avocado flower, in this case from Fuerte, with the anther open. So we pollinated by hand, rubbing the anther with the stigma. and we label each flower. So the pollen arrive to the stigma, the pollen tubes will grow, and they will reach the ovary. We know that this takes about depending on the temperature, between 8 and 12 hours. So by 12 hours, the pollen tubes are already in the ovary. So when you pollinate the flowers in the female stage, by the next day, when the flowers open in the male stage, the pollen tubes are already in the ovary. So if you remove the style of those flowers from this, using like here, this white area, you remove the style, the pollen tubes are in the ovary, so you can save the styles and leave the ovaries in the tree. So then you can correlate the amount of starch at flower opening in the style with what happened with the ovary of that flower in the tree. Okay, so what we did was we pollinated, and the next day when the flower opened in the male stage, we cut the style and save the style in these ependor tubes, and we label each single flower. Something like this. So the ovary stayed in the tree, and then we store the styles. We also show that there was no difference in doing that. I mean, the percentage of fruit set was very low, both when you cut the styles or when you leave the styles in the flowers. So this treatment didn't affect the flower, so you could use this study. This is how the inflorescence look like when you do this. So you collect from each of the flowers, you collect the style, and you label the flower, and then you know what happened with the flowers. So the results were like this. So this is the amount of starch, and here are the flowers that drop, and these are the flowers that produce fruits. So there was a significant correlation between the amount of starch in the flowers and the likelihood of that flower to produce a fruit. We did similar studies also with colleagues in New Zealand in a different environment, and also looking not only at starch, but looking at other things. And basically, we saw the same thing. We looked at boron. We don't have any problems with boron deficiency in Spain, so there were no differences between the flowers that didn't develop into fruits or the flowers that developed into fruit. However, in New Zealand, there were differences. So the flowers with more boron in the flowers, they produce more fruits than the flowers that had lower boron content. The same with the starch. So we repeated the experiment, and both in Spain and in New Zealand, there was a significant correlation between the amount of starch in the flowers and the likelihood of that flower to produce fruits. We studied also other carbohydrates like saccharose, fructose, glucose, persitol, or mannocellulose, and the results were the same both in Spain and in New Zealand. So basically, what we are seeing here is that the flowers with higher flower quality, that means more carbohydrates, more boron, and probably more amounts of other substances, are more able to produce fruits than the flowers that have low amounts of these compounds. So what we think is that most avocado flowers have a low flower quality, and they will not produce fruits even if they are pollinated. And then where we are using this information is to optimize fertilization, because in Spain, till some years ago, usually there was no fertilization in the winter time because the growers assumed that the avocado trees were in a resting period, so there was no need to apply fertilizers. Work from Carol Lobat and also this work looking at flower quality show that probably that's not the case. And if we apply fertilization during the winter times in Spain, we are going to increase flower quality the next spring, and probably we're going to improve the yield in avocados. Okay, I'm not going to talk about pollinators. That's a very interesting topic. And in many areas of the world, you need pollinators to produce pollen for your variety. But this was covered by Arnon Dag in a previous talk in this avocado cafe. So I'm going to talk now a little bit about pollinators and pollen load on the stigmas. And as we know, I mean, honeybee is the main pollinator that is used in avocado all over the world. And we know that the pollen must be transferred between trees of different flowering type, or also within the same tree if we have a very good overlap between female and male flowers. And previous work done also by Hodel and Arpaya and Hobbs in California and later in Chile show that you need insects similar to bees to have good pollination. So when you have no insects or very small insects, usually you don't get fruit set in the avocados, but you do that when you have bees. This was done in cages where you had the trees into cages and you included the bees inside the cages and you compare that with the control outside. So neither wind nor small insects seem to be effective in avocado pollination. The thing is that the avocados originated in the Americas, and there were no honeybees in the Americas till the Europeans arrived to the continent. There are different insects in America which are native and can pollinate avocados, like different stingless bee species, the so-called meliponas in the Americas, or the Mexican honey wasp, the brachygastra, and other insects. So these are just some images of these stingless melipona bees that form colonies, and also they can even produce some high-quality honey in a lower amount than the honeybees. And there are about 70 species in the Americas. Okay, so going back to my first slides, in which I told you that you can increase fruit set when you hand pollinate. So that means that there's a problem with pollination in avocado. We did different studies in Spain. And the first one was that when we went to the field and we collected flowers at random in the orchards, we saw that most of the flowers didn't have pollen grains on the stigmas. So this is a graph. So in different colors is the amount of flowers in the inflorescences with a high number of flowers, medium number of flowers, or low number of flowers. So that's not important for this case. The most important thing is that about 80% or more of the flowers don't get pollen grains. And the ones that get pollen grains, most of them only get from 1 to 5 pollen grains. Very few flowers, less than 2%, get more than 20 pollen grains under natural conditions. So we are seeing so far two things in this talk. One, that most of the flowers are of low flower quality, so they will drop even if pollinated, and that we have a deficit in pollination. Most of the flowers don't receive pollen, and of those that receive pollen, most of them will receive between 1 and 5 pollen grains, which is usually too low number to produce fertilization. So what we did was to increase the number of beehives in the orchard and see what happens when we increase the number of beehives. So here we have two different studies. The first one is with 10 beehives per hectare at one end of the orchard. And then the results were that about 16% of the flowers receive pollen with 10 beehives per hectare. But if you study when those flowers receive pollen, we notice that only 3.7% of the flowers receive pollen during the female stage, which is the stage in which that pollen is going to produce an embryo and a fruit. So with 10 beehives per hectare under our situation here in Spain, only about between 3 and 4% of the flowers receive pollen in the female stage. We did the experiment of increasing the number of beehives from 10 to 24. And even in an orchard with it was about 1 hectare, we placed 12 in one end of the orchard and the other 12 in the other end of the orchard. We increased a lot the percentage of flowers with pollen. Almost 50% of the flowers received pollen in this situation, but still only 12% of the flowers received pollen during the female stage. So with 24 beehives per hectare, in our case in Spain, only 12% of the flowers were able to receive pollen. In this orchard, it's a solid orchard with Hass, and percentage of fertilization was higher than 90%. So probably it was due to close pollination in the Hass orchard. We did similar experiments in different commercial orchards with different situations. some like these three here with beehives, these two here with no beehives, some with pollinizers, fuerte, bacon in this case, no pollinizers here, bacon here, no pollinizer here, and no pollinizer here. And in all of them, we saw first that the percentage of flowers with pollen was low, and that in most cases, most of the flowers received pollen during the last week of the flowering season, and that's because probably temperatures are higher. But in all the cases, we had the same problem. The number of pollen grains on the stigma at the female stage was very low. Most of the flowers received 0 pollen grains, and very few more than 6 pollen grains. We did a different experiment similar to the one I told you before about starch, in which we pollinated the flowers during the female stage, and the next day in the male stage, we cut the style and we left the ovary on the tree. And in this case, we could correlate the number of pollen grains on the stigma with the likelihood of the flower producing fruits. So, of course, when you have 0 pollen grains on the stigma, there is no fruit set. Red is flowers that drop early. In blue is flowers that are retained for some weeks. And then, which is more interesting, is the green color, which is the fruits that reach maturity. So when you have 0 pollen grains, of course, there is no fruit. But even when you have from 1 to 5 pollen grains on the stigma, most of the flowers will not produce fruits. Only when you have more than 40 pollen grains on the stigma, the likelihood is very high to have fruit set. The problem is that usually you don't reach this amount of pollen grains under natural conditions. I just want to remind you that this was applying pollen by hand on the stigma. So the conclusion here is that you need at least 5 pollen grains on the stigma to have a fruit set. And we've seen before that most of the flowers receive between 0 and 5 pollen grains on the stigma. This is the examples in the different commercial orchards, and in all of them, it was the same situation. Most of the flowers with 0 pollen grains, and the ones that received pollen was between 1 and 5 pollen grains. Very few flowers in any of the orchard with more than 6 pollen grains. We did similar experiments also in Peru, and both in the north and in the south of the country, and this was the same situation. This is the number of pollen grains on the stigma, and this is the percentage of flowers in the female stage that receive pollen. Again, most of the flowers don't receive pollen, both in the north and the south of the country, and the ones that receive pollen usually is between 1 to 5, and very few flowers with more than 6 pollen grains. So we think that this is a problem that is common to most avocado producing regions. We also looked at productivity, in this case in Peru. So this is the percentage of flowers with pollen in the male stage and then the female stage. So if we concentrate here, we see that in orchard A, there was a higher percentage of flowers with pollen than in orchard B. And when you look at kilos per tree, the productivity is higher in orchard A than B. So a better pollination results in a higher productivity. So we have to improve pollination in avocado to increase productivity. Of course, we have to include beehives in our orchards, but there are also other insects in addition to the honeybee that could be interesting for avocado pollination. For example, in Europe, we have more than 1,000 species of solitary bees, and some of them have been seen visiting avocado flowers. We've been looking for strategies to increase the amount of these solitary bees in our avocado orchards. And this is just some example of one of the bee hotels that we are using in Spain. So you see that these are solitary bees. They don't make colonies, but they go to the flowers and they bring pollen to raise the eggs that they're going to lay in these structures here. Okay. So, and we've checked this pollen with molecular markers, and we've seen that some of the pollen that these bees bring to their colonies is avocado pollen. Of course, you have to provide also additional food, not only avocado flowers. The thing is that sometimes there is competition between the other flowers, and the bees will go to the additional flowers. So we are trying to manage this, mainly increasing the amount of bee species, and then maybe removing the other flowers just before the avocado flowering season, to force these solitary bees to move into the avocado flowers. But we are still working with this. But yeah, we are using different strategies to increase the diversity of insects in our orchards and the amount of these additional insects. And we've seen different arthropods, insects visiting the flowers in Spain. Of course, honeybees, but also bumblebees, different kind of species of wasps. Also in Israel, there are interesting results using bumblebees for pollination of avocados. We've seen also many different flies, especially sylphids flies like this one, that some of them can resemble like wasps or bees, but they are indeed flies, because you can tell that from the eyes. And several of these fly species are also interesting for avocado pollination. Of course, there are other species and different butterflies and different beetles that can be seen visiting avocado flowers in Spain and elsewhere. We've done some studies with different insects in caging the avocado trees. And for example, this a commercial fly, Aristalinus aeneus, which is sold in Spain to pollinate horticultural species in the greenhouse. We've seen that these flies also are able to carry avocado pollen. This is avocado pollen collected from the hairs of these flies inside this structure in which we had the flies and the avocado in cages. And this is the percentage of fruit set. We did an experiment comparing hoverfly, bumblebees with this kind of flies and the control outside with honeybees. We didn't get good results with the bumblebees, probably because they were stressed into this cage. So we're trying to repeat these experiments. But the results were very good with these sylphids, with the hoverflies, with this kind of lights in the cage. We got the pollination was very similar to the one outside. So these are the flies, and this is the control outside with honeybees. But the situation is again the same. Most of the flowers receive or 0 pollen grains or between 1 to 5 pollen grains. But these flies, I think, can be interesting to combine with the use of honeybees or bumblebees or other insects for avocado pollination. Similar results have been obtained in different countries, like these are examples in Colombia, in which they have those native Melipona bees, and they have been seen pollinating avocado flowers in Colombia. Also, different species of flies in Colombia associated with pollination in avocado. Similar results also in Australia, which these are the number of pollen grains on the stigma. These are in red are the honeybees, and then these are other species that have been seen pollinating avocado flowers in Australia. And here, in different places in Australia, you can see these are pollen into the stigma per minute. These are honeybees, and these are other wild insects that can pollinate avocado flowers. So there is a need of opportunity to increase the diversity of insects visiting and pollinating avocado flowers in different parts of the world. So just to finish my talk and about this topic of pollinators, avocado production might be limited by pollinator deficit, and there is a need to evaluate this in different producing regions. And several insects, in addition to the honeybee, could be efficient in pollinating avocados. So if we take all this into account, and we ask the question of where have all the avocado flowers gone, first, we have to take into account environmental stress, high temperatures, or low humidity at flowering, or also low temperatures at flowering. Flower quality, if we have most of the flowers of low quality, probably our yield is going to be low. the need of pollinators in several situations, and also pollination deficit. So we have to study if we have this problem, and how can we increase the number and diversity of insects pollinating avocado flowers. And there is a need to perform these studies in the different avocado producing regions. I mean, the results that I showed to you today are the results that we obtained in Spain under our climatic conditions. So you have to study similar situations in different countries to see if the problem is the same or similar, or how the avocado flowers behave in each producing country. And with this, just I would like to thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Anaki. That was great.